My name is Andrew Stotz of the Valuation Master Class Show, and today I'm going to be talking about this question that I got asked from a student of mine. And the question was basically, should all valuation models produce the same result? And I put that on the front here. If you want this PowerPoint, just send me an email at me@Andrew Stotz and I'll send that to you. So this was the question that I got, and I get this question a lot. And let's just look at the question in a little bit more detail. So it's a question from Warda, who is participating in the Global Equity Valuation Competition. And the question is, whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Hold on. I've noticed that different valuation methods can give very different conclusions. For example, a PE-based valuation might suggest a company is undervalued, while a DCF analysis could indicate it's overvalued. How common is this in practice? And for profitable companies, do you think the PE ratio is a more reliable benchmark than DCF? I'd like to hear your opinion. Well, that is a question that I believe many people have. And I'm going to start to answer that a little bit, but let me just pull up hold on. So let's think about this question. The first thing we have to think about, and the way to frame this question, is to simplify the question by saying, if an analyst had perfect foreknowledge, they could tell the future. So their valuation, their multiples, their discount rates are all correct. And they all reflect the future that will come. So we're going to start, Warda, with this concept of simplifying it by saying, assume that we can tell the future. Okay, so now we have that point. So let's ask the question, and you're going to see in a second why I make this simplifying assumption. We're going to now ask the question, if that analyst who has all future knowledge uses two different valuation methods or three, will they come up with the same value? That's my question to you. For anybody listening, watching, thinking about it, what's your answer? Perfect future or foreknowledge, they should have the same answer. Now, before I'm going to answer that question, what I'm going to now talk about is the value of a company. I like to tell people, like, if we calculate correctly the value of a company and say it's 100, what likely is the value of the company the next day? Probably 100. What about the next day? Probably 100. What about the next day? Probably 100. The point that I'm making is that the value of a company doesn't change that much. Once we've calculated it, there has to be, I mean, as long as we've done a good job, we've included a lot of things, it's not going to change that much. But the value, the price of a stock could collapse or rise very quickly. And so that changes every day, but the value of a company doesn't change. So we're going to, it changes slowly, let's say, over time. So now let's go back to the question. And that is, if you had foreknowledge and you use two different models, let's just say the DCF model, like the constant growth model as an example, or a PE model, would you come up with the same answer, the same value? Well, my answer to this question is theoretically, yes. All models will give you the same value. But in practice, no. You'll probably never harmonize the valuation methods. Now, we also have to be a little bit careful because PE is valuing the earnings. Free cash flow is valuing the free cash flow. dividend discount model is valuing dividends. Now, if a company pays out 100% of its earnings as dividends, then okay, it's going to be the same value as the PE model. But because companies don't pay out all their profit as dividends, then we're going to have some problems there. So now let's go into I prepared a little presentation, which I'm going to walk through some things that I want you to understand to answer this question. First, let's talk about PE valuation. So value equals earnings times the PE multiple. So what drives the value? Well, higher expected earnings is going to increase value, and a higher PE multiple will increase value. That's it. So, but what affects this PE multiple? Well, first, the PE multiple is a multiple that the market or yourself are coming up with based upon your expectations of earnings growth. And it's also based upon your expectations of risk to future earnings. So let's think about Microsoft as an example. Would you pay a high PE or a low PE for that? Well, you probably would pay a high PE for Microsoft because the expected earnings growth is pretty strong. And the risk to earnings, well, they've got such a stranglehold on the market that it's very hard. Even when Google came out with Google Docs and Google Sheets, still, it's a tiny, tiny market compared to Excel as an example. So that's the first thing I want us to think about is PE valuation. It's a simplified valuation. And also the other thing that PE multiple reflects is how quickly earnings reach shareholders. And that means that, money coming in now in earnings is better than money coming in later. So I want to just talk about this for a moment because I want to think about what we see here. So let's talk about this. I'm going to make this big and me small. Hold on. There you go. So if we look at this, what I want to say, though, is that the PE reflects these three items, but it doesn't explicitly state them or include them. They are implied in whatever PE multiple you choose. So right there, you can see that a PE valuation condenses or contracts the variables into just two: earnings and multiple. So next, let's look at the constant growth dividend discount model. There's a reason why I choose this one, but for right now, let's just use the constant growth dividend discount model. It values the expected dividend next period divided by the difference between the required rate of return and the growth rate. So what drives value for a constant growth dividend discount model? Well, higher dividend increases value. In fact, this is one that people kind of forget. You have a company that's paying a dividend of $100. You got a company paying a dividend of $1,000. That 1,000, the absolute value or the absolute level of the dividend impacts the value. And whoops, just did that again, press the wrong button. The second one is higher sustainable dividend growth increases value. Now that higher growth is a function of the return on invested capital that the company gets relative to the weighted average cost of capital. If they're getting very strong value creation, then they're going to also deliver earnings growth and dividend growth. And lower risk of the dividend stream increases value. If you think about one of the things that made Warren Buffett so much money on Coca-Cola is that the riskiness of that dividend stream is so low because it's such an ongoing consumption product, a consumer staple. And with that consumer staple, basically people order over and over again. So now we understand that there's slightly different inputs here when we're calculating the constant growth dividend discount model than the PE model. We're going to explicitly say what's the dividend. We're going to explicitly try to use a growth rate, and we're going to explicitly state a risk level. And we need those factors to calculate using the constant growth model. We don't need all those factors to calculate the PE ratio. So dividends may be derived from earnings and the payout ratio, but earnings and payout matter only because they determine dividends. So now let's look at the final one that we'll look at today is the free cash flow of the firm valuation. So remember that this method values the firm value equals the present value of all future free cash flows to the firm, meaning to all capital providers, both debt and equity. And then the equity value equals that firm value minus the net debt. So this model makes growth, reinvestment, risk, and timing explicit rather than bundled. So in the prior two examples, many different assumptions are bundled into one multiple. And they're also bundled into either a growth rate or a discount rate for the constant growth dividend discount model. So what drives value with a free cash flow valuation? Well, higher free cash flow increases value. And faster and long-lasting free cash flow growth increases value. And lower investment needs increases free cash flow and value. And the lower risk of future free cash flows increases value. Again, go back to Coca-Cola. The riskiness of the cash flows of Coca-Cola is very, very low. It's a consumer staples product, and that usually means that the volatility of it is very low. And then because when we start to use free cash flow, when we move away, when we do a DCF, a discounted cash flow model, but not the constant growth model, now we need a timeline. And we need a timeline because we need to start assigning cash flows to particular periods or years. And when we assign cash flows to particular periods or years, then we can better discount them to understand what's the value today. And if we were to make a timeline and we saw that dividends were going to come way in the future, that's worth less. But if we saw that dividends are coming right, or cash flow, free cash flow, dividends or the like, are coming right now in recent years, that's more valuable. So those are the three methods that I wanted to review briefly and discuss a little bit more. So now I'm going to talk about this. So why is it that I say, in theory, if you knew the future, all three models would be the same, but in practice, that would never happen? Why is that? Well, it's because these three models require very different inputs. Although we're talking about a risk, let's just take the free cash flow to the firm model. We need a discount rate, and that discount rate could be calculated for the first 3 years separately based upon the weighted average cost of capital, and it could be different over time. So equating an over time discount rate to a discount rate to infinity is very, very difficult. If we look at the PE multiple, all we're looking at is earnings, basically 1 year ahead. And the result of that is that we can't really compare that with all the detail that we're looking at in a free cash flow model. So the reason why in practice, many companies, many valuations don't end up the same is because not only because we don't know the future. And so we're going to have a problem with forecasting the dividends and the free cash flow and the all of the different things, and the risk, but also because the inputs are so different that it's very difficult to equalize them. Now you could say, well, Andrew, I can do that in Excel. I can do to go to a solver and solve for value. which is fine. You could do that and get them all to be equal. But what factor are you going to adjust? You're going to adjust the PE multiple. You're going to adjust the earnings. You're going to adjust the discount rate. You're going to adjust the weighted average cost of capital. Or are you going to adjust the cost of equity? Are you going to adjust the time period? Are you going to adjust how long you forecast versus how long you have the terminal period? All of those adjustments cannot be harmonized and equalized against the different models. And that's the reason why in practice, we don't see the same. That's my answer to the question. And I actually have been working on this quite a bit, and there's more I want to present, but I thought let's set the framing of it first. Remember, if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, just send me a message at me@andrewstotz.com, and then I'll send you this PowerPoint. So, my name is Andrew Stotz of the Valuation Master Class, and I hope to see you in our next boot camp. When's our next boot camp coming up? Well, the next one is coming up on February 16th. Exciting. We're getting close. We're getting there. We're making some major improvements compared to the last boot camp, which I'm super excited about because those improvements are going to be amazing. So that gives you an idea. You can also get a discount by messaging me. And in the meantime, I hope that you build a competitive advantage in company valuation. And if you have a question, just email it to me or put it in the comment to this.